Patricia, you'll be on today talking about basic income. Patricia, I'm the host of Canadians with Disabilities. My name is Brent. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, we are picking up from where we were last week, aren't we? And there were some things that I did not get to address that I would like to. It's incumbent upon us, I believe, to look after our constituents. And I say constituents. Whenever we say the word constituent, we always think of just like a local area. MPs have constituents. But the truth is that we are all constituents. I believe that when we use that term, I believe that it's driven by even a larger entity. I believe that we are all constituents of the entire nation. That's essentially what I'm going to leave it at. And we all have unique needs. We're not just one thing. We're not segregated by virtue of being people with disabilities. We're not separated by being just Black, Indigenous, or racialized. We're not separated by just being geared at one specific level, because you can be Black, Indigenous, or racialized and still be a person with disabilities. It's broad, and people are affected in multiple ways, specifically by poverty, and poverty is also incredibly broad. And that means that it affects you in lots of different ways. Not if you specifically, but if you think specifically in terms of a space which is, I don't want to say the word demonizing, but a less, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess you know how awesome I am with remembering adjectives. a sort of a distasteful space in society. I guess that's how
Yeah.
Where it's something which you kind of want to steer away from. We think about these sorts of things, and we look upon people impoverished, and we think to ourselves, well, that will never be me, until it automatically is. And then all of a sudden we're worried because we fear the judgment of the rest of society. We fear how we're being pushed into a space, and then all of a sudden something like basic income becomes a priority, but how we get there is not necessarily something upon which we all can agree. And so I think it's important for us to come together, and the best way for us to do that, in my opinion, after all of my research, is for us to come under it or a broad umbrella. If I've said it once, I've said it a billion times. We need to be able to function underneath the most executing thing we have, which is our tax brackets. Our tax brackets are applicable to everybody. And because it's simple. Do you know what I mean? It's simple, and it treats people with respect. The thing I like about this is that it makes us, not only does it keep us accountable on the one hand, that's fine, but it means that we are treated like adults, I think it's a very important thing to recognize that because we participate in society, we are now treated like adults. We're not treated like beneficiaries in any way. This is no longer a handout. And this is something which everybody is always saying, oh, you're getting, this is just a handout, your benefits are always looked upon as handouts. Oh my God, how often are people who are on something like ODSP or people like Canada Disability Benefit? I can't wait for somebody to look at me when if I was to go on the Canada Disability Benefit and say, wow, you're just getting a handout. Like my ex, he was to me to go on something like disability, but like on ODSP. And I knew that he was automatically going to tell me going to be a handout, because he was that type. He was essentially that type. He was a hard worker. He probably still does, a master's in nuclear engineering and a bachelor's in nuclear engineering and a master's in particle physics. This was not a man unaccustomed to the concept of academic full achievement on the one hand. On the other hand, he he belittled and he looked down upon people who lived in distasteful positions, and he was always mad at his mother for getting people lived in on the streets, and he was always confounded by the concept of charity. Well, charity doesn't need to exist if people are full participants in society. And so I think that's a very important thing to be aware of. And I want to stand away from something like GLBI, because GLBI is just another form of maintaining poverty, and I'm not okay with that. I don't want to maintain poverty. I want to eradicate poverty. We don't need it. It shouldn't be a part of our lives. It shouldn't be a part of our society. And that's why I truly believe that we need to step up and create a society which is supported by everyone. There were a couple of things from last time which I believe we need to address, and I would like to come back to them. There was a question that was put to me which I didn't get to. I guess maybe my brain had started to stop functioning or whatever, but somebody had commented about how BI, my BI strategy, would it be affected by inflation? And after listening to our last talk, I wanted to mention that the idea is that it acts like a genuine wage. When you're being paid, it's like any income wage. It's susceptible to wage increases. If you have an inflationary society, you are paid like wage, and you become a participant, and so therefore you get a raise, essentially. So as genuine inflation increases, which is not the same, by the way, I'd like to point out that inflation is not the same sort of thing as corporate greed, but it's actually based on factors that any genuine commodity-based economy is based on. The factors: market value, crude materials, labor, crop availability and viability, international trade and returns. So does the value of basic income or any actual wage subsidy. What we're seeing right now is corporate greed. Companies posting huge profit margins during a time where there's massive wealth disparity, and it's not the same thing as inflation. So I think that's something which is very important to note. So just like any genuine wage, where you get a raise every 6 months or every year, whatever, basic income would reflect that. And I think that's something which is important to note. Something else that I was at was, if I thought that an older generation is making basic income exclusive, my thoughts on that was yes and no. I think that they're trying to sell exclusive idea to a younger generation to get them to align to their values in the same way that they have done with all of their other economic policies. They do it with certain catchphrases, and it becomes another form of colonization. They use phrases like tax the rich, which don't really mean anything, and it obscures a larger picture, which means that no policy is created because no policy is suggested. And we see this in other badly needed areas of immediate policy, of immediate required stakes like the environment, which is protected by corporate strategy. If we demand specific policy like tax bracket solutions, then we have a strategy to disenfranchise an old school mechanism which has been impoverishing the middle class, the working and poverty classes, for decades. Those are some thoughts I just wanted to reiterate, make sure that I got out of the way. Yeah, I am always here to talk about basic income and to try and make it as relevant a subject as I possibly can.
We'll go to some questions here, actually. Anthony?
Hey, Brent, this is my other Twitter handle, from Above and Beyond, just so you guys are aware as well. We just celebrated National Accessibility Week, and the theme was inclusive from the start. Now, basic income has been a long withstanding conversation. So I guess my thought and mindset goes to, how do we start? How do we get to the solution, and what type of process do you believe it would take to get there? Whether it's, I know it's a marathon, not a sprint, but how do we get there towards the ultimate solution that benefits all? Back to you.
Oh, this is an excellent question. And you know what? I think that the real answer is coming together under one broad understanding of what basic income really is. Because there are a lot of suggestions as to what basic income is. And basic income has got so many, I want to say titles, but I don't even think that the word titles is right, but like we give them names like GLBI or UBI, and UBI has got two definitions, either universal basic income or unconditional basic income. I like to stay away from these names now because I don't think it's healthy to give them names, because once you give things names, all of a sudden you create access requirements. And I don't think that's good. I think that if we create access requirements, we're creating barriers of entry. And I believe that basic income should be something which is available to everybody. How many people do we know who are in a state of complete impoverishment, and yet many people do we know that require second jobs in order to live? Lifestyle isn't something that should be restricted from people. On the one hand. On the other hand, we have built ourselves a society of consumerism. I don't care about that. I'm fine with that. On the one hand, people have designed lives that they want. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. I like lattes, and I've lived a life where I like lattes, and so therefore I want to drink lattes. On the one hand. On the other hand, people kind of poo-poo the idea of lattes now because, all of a sudden that's some kind of snobbery. But I don't feel like people need to judge anybody for this. I am not willing to judge people based on the kinds of things that they want in their lives, and I don't think that we should. And I also don't feel as though it's okay to put people in a position where their lives are restricted by the kinds of things they want to enter into. And so the basic income that I have in mind is one which is attached to tax brackets, and it's an actual livable wage. And income, the word income is synonymous with the word wage. And so we call it a basic income because basic is just, it's not just food, shelter, and water, so to speak. It's a lot more than that. How you live your life is how you want your life to be. I don't know anybody in this economy who can live off of less than $40,000. And so when I think of basic income, I think of a framework which starts at $40,500 for people who earn $0 to $5,000. And it means that people can have a full livable wage, and it means that they can afford the lives they want. They can live in homes that they want. Because they can pay rent, and it also isn't too much money. We're not giving people all the money in all the world. It means that it's taxed at the federal, the provincial level, and it means that we can organize a system where they can pay into CPP so that when they're older, they can add CPP back on to their basic income that they already earn. It also means that, like, in my mind, in my idealism, I don't believe that basic income should start at the age of 65. I think that you should be able to access basic income for your whole entire life. But I also believe that by the time you're 65 years old, you should be given a little more breathing room. I think CPP should be something that adds back into your life, because I believe that people who are older need a few more resources.